It's all about the dots, right? Settle down. I'm working on it. I am working on it. First, thank you to the Art League for putting us here and having a great venue for all these artists.
I'm just glad there were so many people here.
Me too. That's one of the things that I really enjoy when I came back to painting is the community. This is my tribe, this is my people. Everybody has a creative sense. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to tell you about some of the artists that influenced me. Then I'm going to take this little guy apart and piece by piece hand it around so you can see just exactly what goes on with it. First, I was born in Tarrytown, New York, right across the street from Sleepy Hollow. If any of you know New York, Sleepy Hollow, Headless Horseman. So I'll give you a little context there. I was brought up by my grandparents. My mother and father divorced when I was like 2 years old. So I moved down to South Florida with my grandparents, just north of Fort Lauderdale. It's in Lighthouse Point, if any of you know that area. So I would visit my father in New York. He had a place in Manhattan, and he was actually a painter. And I have some of his work here. Unfortunately, they're like scanned images of old photos, so the colors and things aren't like ideal, but it'll give you a little idea once you see it, the influence that he had on me. So I grew up in South Florida, didn't really paint that much. I'd go on summer vacations or Christmas or whatever, we'd get together with my dad and whatever, so there was an influence there. Went to school. I took some drawing classes in high school and things, but I was never really into it that much. And then I went to college, and I was going for business and management. Dry. It was just dry. It was something I probably should have done, but so in my junior year, I switched my college from business to humanities because I had taken a couple of out-of-college electives, design and drawing and whatever, and I just fell in love with it. I knew that's where I wanted to go. But I also knew that I wasn't going to make any money at it. Realistically, I wasn't going to make any money at it. So while I was in college, I was working at a couple of local newspapers as a pace-up artist and that sort of thing, just to get my feet wet with commercial art. So I ended up art director at an ad agency. And from there, I had a bout with cancer. It was thank God, everything's good. But there were a couple of weeks where it kind of changes your frame of mind, your reference. And I always wanted to start my own business, even though I left College of Business to College of Humanities, but I always wanted to start my own business. And you can be really creative in business, especially if it's your own business. And so I did that for about, started in 89, 90, and sold the business in 2014. And then I came back to painting. And when I was in college painting, I was doing hard edge, surrealistic landscapes. And I'm going to show you. When I was just out of college, I was working, but I was also painting. There was a couple of galleries I had down in South Florida that would generate commissions for me. Now, it wasn't fine art per se, in the sense that there'd be a painting up on a wall in the gallery, and someone would come in and say, I really like that, but I've got a green couch. You know, can you do it in green? And I'm like, yeah, yeah. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't fine art per se. But, and that lasted for, Lord, 10 years off and on. It was really good. There was a building boom there. It was mid-'80s. It was awesome. And here's some of the pieces that I did back then. Again, a lot different than what I'm doing now. The only thing in common was on plexiglass, but it was only on one sheet of plexiglass on both sides. I got much more figurative. Again, when you fall in love and get married, you start painting flowers and things, you know, and not cold, surrealistic landscapes. So some of the artists that influenced me over the years, as far as color, Nikolai Simbari. So he's an impressionist that was really popular in the 80s. And I really like his use of complementary color. Now you see a lot of people using, you know, blues and reds and whatever together, but I really like the way he was able to do it in a subtle manner. I just really loved it. And he also painted women, which I love too. As for lighting, Rembrandt. I mean, actually photographers have a term, and it's called Rembrandt lighting, and it's a certain way that you light a subject. And so Rembrandt. Now, as far as composition is really important to me. That's when I was in doing commercial art, and as an art director, design obviously is extremely important. So it really influenced me a lot. But as far as the artists that influenced me compositionally wise, believe it or not, Grant Wood and George Bellows, they're two American realists during this turn of the century, and they were very strong composition. Now, one of the things that I really like about plexiglass is there's many layers. So it's kinetic, it moves as you move around it. And the artist that really influenced me is a Israeli artist called Yaakov Agam. And he was doing this during the 50s and 60s. And you've seen this now, but he would take, I actually don't know what he used, whether it was canvas or what, probably wood, but make little triangles of wood like this. And from one side you'd see one image, and then from this side you'd see another image, and from the front. Now you see that a lot of people are doing it now, but back in the day, you know, it was a big deal. So I love the idea of art being kinetic, of it changing. I mean, sitting up on the wall, but as you move around it, it's moving. I really like it. It's a big influence on me. There's a painter called Chuck Close. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with him, but I don't think you're familiar with him as a pointillist artist. He was originally a photorealist, he airbrushed, but he ended up doing pointillist paintings. Now, he's not known as a pointillist painting, but if you look at this example, you will see that that's exactly what it is. So pointillist painters mix color visually. So they'll put red, you know, next to yellow, and you'll see orange. They mix color visually, not with actually mixing the paint per se. And if you see this, Chuck Close, pointillist painter. So what I'm going to do is, I don't bring the house down, is, like I said, if I don't bring the house down, I'm going to take this apart and I'm going to describe what I'm doing with these pieces. So most recently, I've really got into actually being a pointillist painter. In the past, people have looked at my work and seen dots and assumed that I was a pointillist painter. And that's not the case. I was actually doing stippling. Nice dots. Oh, thank you. I was actually doing stippling. So stippling is shading with dots. So it's just shading. It's not blending color. It was just shading. But you know, I'm saying, well, thank you. You know, but that's really not what I was doing at the time. The past year, little over a year, I've actually been mixing color with dots, as a pointillist painter would. Now, if you come up and you look at this, you'll see 2 layers of dots. One layer on the top is kind of a muted natural tones. The layer on the bottom is very saturated color. Some very cool, some very warm, depending on what I wanted to achieve. So you get up close, you can see all that going on. You get back, it's blended, just as a pointillist painter would. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going in now. Back here now, and I'm going to take this apart, you'll be able to see a lot closer. This was where there was no blending of color. It was just basically stippling. So here's, when I start a painting, I have an idea. I work in Photoshop a lot. So you can imagine you have all these dots. You got to, which dot goes where, the registration. So it's mostly put together before I lay down any paint. It's pretty much the design's done, the composition's done. I even make stencils. Stencils, it's a bad word. Templates, so that I know exactly where I'm going to be placing these dots. An interesting thing when I'm taking this frame off is back when I first started doing multiple sheets of plexiglass, it was like, how do I hang it? How do I frame it? You know, what? So I went through a few iterations, and what I've come up with now works. There's probably, I'm sure there's alternate ways of doing it, but it's the way it works now. So I'm taking off, these are called standoffs. Photographers use these all the time to mount their work. And I like the idea of the piece being separate from the wall a little bit. It adds that dimension, again, as you're kind of moving, adds that 3D aspect to it. So when I'm designing something, I'm thinking about all these layers. And I'm thinking, what's going to go on the front? What's going to go on the back? When I first started doing it, I actually had the foreground. So traditionally painters, they paint the background, lay down color, shapes, and then work up to the highlights of the foreground, typically, in general. And I do pretty much the same. So if I've got 3 sheets of plexiglass, the sheet closest to the wall is going to have those large blocks of color, and then as I come forward, each sheet has a little bit more detail. And I really took that to an extreme with some paintings. I don't do it so much anymore because I'm working with blending color. Oh, I gotta tell you about this painting first. I'm just taking it apart. Okay, so this painting, now I gotta hold it together. Okay, this painting is like 3-4 years old. There was do you guys know about the Orlando Museum of Art First Thursdays? So they have themed shows on the first Thursday of every month. Now, they had, and this was when I just started painting again, and I really wanted to because I usually don't paint for shows other than the music show. But I thought this would be awesome to do this. So here's what they said they wanted for this show. With the rise of expression with handheld cameras and devices, the selfie has emerged as the main component in photography. How do you interpret selfies in the modern day world, and how does this relate to past art masterpieces? All media encourage yada, yada, yada. Okay, so I had this image of this Facebook friend of a friend, and I wanted to do like this image of this girl, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. I mean, I just wasn't, it's really something. I mean, she's got tattoos, she's got eyes the size of dinner plates, you know. It was an awesome image, but I didn't know how the hell to do it. So then I heard this like First Thursday thing, selfie. I'm thinking, hell yeah, masterpiece. Anybody, this look familiar to anybody? Girl Before a Mirror. Girl Before a Mirror, selfie. Yeah, that kind of works. Girl Before a Mirror, masterpiece. See? So it all came together. And like I said, I usually don't paint to like a show or, you know, specifically. I want to give you the back. So this is actually part printed and part painted. But anyway, so here's the back. This is how we start. So it's actually on canvas. So here, just go ahead and take that and you can pass it around.
Did you paint that?
It's a mixture of, I printed it out. I've got like an Epson something printer, and I printed it out on the Epson, and then I also painted over it some, yeah.
And then you pasted it on.
And then I pasted it on, yep. Easy peasy. Well, the easy part was the painting part. The printing it through the printer was not.
What did you glue that on?
Just some gel medium, you know, acrylic. So what I'm taking off here are these washers. So my paintings usually have about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch between the sheets of plexiglass. Each sheet of plexiglass is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So depending upon the actual effect that I want to create. So this is painted with acrylic paint right on the plexiglass. So this is the background. So for you painters, you know, you put down blocks of color and then you work towards the highlights and whatever. So that's what this is, kind of the underpainting. There's some dots here as well.
So it's a print of the image?
No, that's painted. That's
Okay,
just
then you
painted.
painted the image
Yep.
on canvas again?
No, it's directly on the plexiglass. Yep.
And it's acrylic paint?
Yep. I use Golden's High Flow. So now we got all dots. Now, and the first few paintings I did like this were on plexiglass, and I was just using dots. And you can see there's, you know, you can get the image that you're looking for, but having some underpainting really gives it some definition.
Eric, Robert, I'm dying to know how you apply the dots.
That's a secret. I'm not telling. Yes, one by one. One by one. No, Kitty, I actually use it's like a quill pen, you know? It's because it's the high flow, it's golden high flow, so it's like an ink, really. And that's what I use, and I can, you know, you can mix any colors. And consistency, I add some,
You dip, put it on there.
yeah. You know what, I should have brought, you can't believe how many little cups of paint that I mixed up, and I got these little cups of paint, and I got, no, it's great, it's awesome. So now I don't have to mix all the time, I just go open up a drawer, these are all this. It's awesome.
This is one by one.
One by
You
one.
don't have automatic, you do like.
No, come on, no.
Anytime you eat or sleep?
So a lot of the paintings that I do are of these women who are like Facebook friends. And you get images off Facebook and it's going to be low resolution. I don't really need like a high resolution. All I need is just something to kind of to go by. So this is the top piece of dots. Okay, so you see there's just a few. There's not a lot. I'm sure you can't hardly see it here. But again, just these few dots give so much more dimension because they're really moving when you move around the piece. So I don't really have any problem with adhesion, but it's got to be clean. No oil, you know, it's got to be clean. And a lot of times as well, when you get a new sheet of plexiglass, there'll be a covering on it. And when you peel that off, there's a lot of static. You don't want to put down, at least the paint that I'm putting down, the very liquid, the kind of inky paint, because it'll start spreading out and going crazy with the electric. Yeah. So the last piece of the puzzle brings the painting together because it was done because it's a selfie. So here's the phone. Okay. So,
Did you win an award for this piece?
I'm glad you asked, Hattie. I got best in show.
Do you paint both sides of the glass ever?
I used to, back in the day, those old paintings from the 80s, I painted on one sheet of 1/4 inch plexiglass, and I'd paint on both sides. I initially started painting on plexiglass because I wanted to be a hard edge painter, and you can get a really hard edge because it's very slick. It's not porous, right? You can put some tape down there, you can put down the paint, and it's like you're good to go. And so that's, yeah. So it was on both sides, and I liked painting on the back side. You know, the most back then, I liked because it was like putting a glaze on it. You know, the color really popped, and it was just like putting a glaze on something. And then it occurred to me, damn, there's actually two surfaces. You can work with that, you know? There's things you can do. So the largest piece that I'm doing now is 36 by 48. And, oh, the thickness? That big, it's between like 1/8 and 1/4. It's not 1/4, it'd be too much because I've got like 2 or 3 sheets that big, plus other sheets, it'd be too much. With these standoffs, I can place them strategically so I'm not going to get a lot of bending and warping of the plexiglass. So I can keep it thinner, but it's 3 feet by 4 feet. For something like this, it's just awkward. It's not, I mean, it's heavy, it's probably 30 pounds, but it's more awkward than anything to carry it around.
Robert, is there anybody else in the world doing anything like what you're doing?
So yes, there are artists that are painting on
No,
plexiglass.
I mean, with all the layers that you're doing.
Yes, they're not doing it the way I'm doing it. They're not doing dots. So the reason, yes and no. The answer is yes and no. Yes, there are painters painting on plexiglass both sides and layers, but not for the same reasons that I'm doing it, and not in the same way that I'm doing it. So why do I use dots? Can anybody figure out why I use dots?
You like
I'm nervous.
you're a little bit nutty, maybe.
I'm nutty. I'm a lot nutty. Well, he actually, yes, that yes. But here's yes.
It shows movement.
Making your eye do the
Gives you,
Absolutely.
Gives you dimension.
Yes, movement, dimension. So here's the thing. This painting has got a lot of detail in it for being dots, right? And the movement, the dimension of it is because you can see through one layer to the next layer. Now, I could put big brushstrokes like impressionist painters, Lolita calls them dabs. And I have done that. I actually have done that. But dots allow me to get a lot of detail, and you can see, I can put 3 layers of dots, and you can see the last layer, and you can see that movement. So that's why I use dots. Yeah.
And that,
questions about the plexiglass. Do you have a problem with falling of the paint? You have to treat it to something first. So the paint sticks good.
So I really don't have a problem with adhesion because of the paint that I use. I use that golden high flow, and then I also put some like gloss medium in there to kind of harden the paint a little bit. But no, I don't have, the only time I ever have problems with adhesion or issues with applying the paint is when there's some oil. I've handled the plexiglass too much in the area that I'm painting, or like I said, there's static electricity, but that very rarely happens because that's usually gone by the time I start putting paint down. Yeah?
When you've handled it too much and you need to put the paint on, what do you clean it with then, at that point?
So, so if I'm going to clean like this piece, everybody was handling it, so I'll clean it. It's just a Windex, just anything but anything but alcohol,
Windex and then like a cloth or a paper towel.
Just a paper towel, just lightly. I'm not like going crazy with it. Yeah.
I noticed this painting that you have about maybe 4 layers,
Yeah.
4 or 5. Is there a particular distance between them that you find it ideal to achieve that depth thing that you have? I noticed everything is sandwiched together, but then there is a formula to it. Is there a...
So it's very subjective. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So the further they're separated, the more movement you're going to get. Okay? The closer they are together, the more detail you're going to get. So you won't have the shadows and other things kind of interfering. So if you want something that has a lot more detail, it's a lot closer. If you want something that is really got a 3D kind of effect, further away. And they all don't have to be the same. On the same piece, they could be different, whatever looks good. Yeah. Yeah.
For example, if you too close it's not having too much air, so you never have a problem with some molding or some problem, or you pass some protection also in the painting. If it's too close, you never have a problem,
Right.
moisturizing, molds and...
Right. So even the pieces that are like supposed to be close together, there's at least one of the, Connie, I'm sorry, I got these little washers all over the place here, sorry. But there's there's at least one of those between. just so that it doesn't stick, and yeah, there's some air and so, yeah,
Plastic
yeah.
balloons, rust or stuff like
Yep,
that.
yep.
Do you
Yep.
ever choose any kind of subject matter besides beautiful women? Is that your thing?
Why would I ever want to do that? Yes, yeah, I do. I do. It's interesting that I just this past summer had a show, and it was called Men Painting Women. So it was me and 4 other artists that were in the show, and we all mostly paint women. And it's interesting because we all had different reasons, and the images that we created are all different. And so I thought it'd really be interesting to have a show like that. So my grandparents raised me. So my grandmother was a big influence on me when I was like in my formative years. A lot of the people that I've worked with that have mentored me have been women. So I've always, I like women. But also, thanks, Barb. Yep. So also, just had a brain fart. Yeah, it's always about women.
You got a lot of Facebook beautiful women.
Yeah. I hope that answers a little bit.
I
Yeah.
just find quirky looking, interesting looking people are more interesting to me.
Oh, I know what I was going to get at. When I came back to painting, I really wanted to do figurative work. The human face is just incredibly expressive, and it just really interested me. And so that's where and if I'm going to do a face, why not do a beautiful woman? I don't know. Sorry. Okay, good.